In the hill country beyond the river Aguji, where the mist never fully lifts before noon and the monkeys hold court at dusk, there was once a village called Eshawo. It was not a large village. It was not a rich village. But it was, without question, the most talkative village in all of the known world. In Eshawo, a man could sneeze on Monday and by Tuesday his sneeze would have been debated, dissected, and given a motive. By Wednesday, the sneeze would have a name. By Thursday, the elders would have called a meeting about it. By Friday, someone's marriage would be blamed on it. Into this village, some 27 years before our story begins, a boy was born. His name was Obele Dafara. His mother was Mama Sikui, a woman of narrow frame but enormous spirit, the sort of woman whose laugh could chase thunder and whose silence could quiet a market. His father, a trader of leather goods, died when Obele was only 4, leaving Mama Sikui alone to raise her only son. And raise him she did. With cracked heels and proud shoulders, she traded peppers, plaited hair, and pounded yam for neighbors who were too busy to pound their own. She sent Obele to the district school. She bought him shoes when she wore none. She fasted on Tuesdays, though she told everyone she simply wasn't hungry on Tuesdays, so that Obele might have fish with his evening meal. The forest would be silent if no bird sang except the one that sang best. Obele grew. He was neither the cleverest boy in Eshawo nor the most handsome, but he was steady, like a river that never runs dry. He worked at the district office in the nearby town of Iberiku, filing papers and copying letters. It was modest work. But he saved every coin he did not spend, and in 5 years he had saved enough to buy a small piece of land on the better side of Iberiku, the side where the roads were paved and the neighbors did not keep roosters with no sense of time. There, on that land, Obele built himself a house. A real house, with a zinc roof that did not apologize for rain, and a veranda where a man could sit and watch the world as though he had arranged it himself. He furnished it with careful pride. He planted a frangipani tree at the gate. He bought a second-hand sofa with patterns that suggested wealth without confirming it. And then, as these things tend to happen in stories and in life, Obele married. Her name was Adiza Mirindi, and she was beautiful in the way that certain problems are beautiful. Completely, compellingly, and with hidden consequences. She came from the lowland town of Ojakuembi, where her father had once been a minor chief, a title that had since dissolved with his fortunes but which Adiza wore like a crown regardless. She had from the very first week of her marriage, one singular ambition, to become the most admired woman in Iberiku. This was not an immoral ambition. It was simply an expensive one. And an inconvenient one. Particularly for anyone who stood between Adiza Mirindi and the image she was constructing of herself. Mama Sikui, for her part, came to visit only twice a year. She was not a woman who imposed herself. But even those twice-yearly visits were, to Adiza, like pebbles in a fine shoe. Mama Sikui would arrive from Eshawo with her old wrapper and her loud laughter and her habit of reorganizing kitchen items just to help, and suddenly the careful portrait Adiza had painted of herself, the sophisticated wife of a district officer, would develop a very inconvenient crack. Adiza began to work on Obele. Not dramatically. Not in one speech. No, she was far cleverer than that. She worked the way water works on stone, consistently, patiently, and always with the appearance of being perfectly harmless. "Your mother is a wonderful woman," she would say, folding laundry. "She has such rustic charm. Did you notice," she would mention, serving his soup, "how Mama rearranged the spice shelf? Everything smells like the bush market now. It's fine, though. It's fine. I heard Madame Aniagwa say she saw your mother at the standpipe, washing her wrapper right there by the road. I'm not saying anything. It's fine. People are different. Drop by drop. Month by month." Obele, who loved his mother the way one loves the house one grew up in, fiercely but without thinking to say so, began, slowly, almost without noticing, to see Mama Sikui through the narrow lens his wife had carefully ground for him. When the music changes, so does the dance, but wise men first ask who changed the music. He started asking his mother to call before visiting. Then he asked her to visit less. Then he said the house was being renovated, for 3 months. Then he simply stopped answering her messages with the same warmth. When Mama Sikui knocked and Ediza said, "It's your mother," Obele had learned to exhale in a particular way before rising to open the door. The village of Eshewo, of course, noticed. Eshewo always noticed. The gossip moved like smoke, low at first, then filling every corner. Obele has forgotten his mother. That wife has swallowed his sense. Mama Sikui fasted so that boy could eat, and now he gives her crumbs of his time. But Mama Sikui said nothing. She was not a woman who complained to the world. She planted her peppers. She plaited her neighbor's hair. She sat on her veranda at dusk and spoke softly to the baobab tree at the edge of her compound, the one her husband had planted before he died, as if it was still listening. Which, as we shall see, it was. The stranger nobody could place. It was the dry season, the harmattan, when the air turns to fine red dust and everyone's lips crack and everyone blames someone else for their irritability, when a stranger appeared in Iberiku. She arrived on a Thursday, which is significant because in Iberiku, Thursday is market day, and market day is when everyone sees everyone. If you want to be seen, arrive on a Thursday. If you want to go unnoticed, well, you are already in the wrong story. The stranger was old. Not merely aged, old in the way that certain mountains are old, in a manner that makes you feel time differently when you stand near them. She wore a deep indigo wrapper of the kind no one could quite place the origin of, and she walked with a carved wooden staff topped with something that looked, depending on the angle, either like a bird or like a question mark. Nobody could agree on which. She sat up at the corner of the market beside the groundnut cellar, spread a cloth on the ground, and placed upon it a single clay pot. Just one. It had no markings and no lid, and from it came a smell that was not quite food and not quite incense, more like the memory of rain, or the feeling of a word you know but cannot locate. "What are you selling, old mother?" asked Ezini the groundnut seller, who was not afraid of strangers and was in fact delighted by them, as they gave her something to discuss for weeks afterward. "Truth," said the old woman, pleasantly. Ezini laughed. "Is it expensive?" "It costs nothing," said the stranger. "But it cannot be returned once purchased." Ezini bought a cup of ground nuts and considered this deeply. Within 3 days, the entire market was talking about the old woman. Some said she was a healer. Some said she was a seer. One man, Boniface Okafor, who operated the provisions shop and had an opinion on every subject, said she was simply a very old woman who had found a clever way to sell a clay pot with nothing in it, and that people were fools. Boniface said this to his wife, who told her sister, who told the palm wine seller, who told everyone at the bar that evening. By the time the story returned to Boniface, he had apparently said the woman was a goddess in disguise, and he was treating her to palm wine every morning as penance. Boniface was furious but for once, said nothing. It was on the 7th day of the stranger's presence that something extraordinary occurred. Obele Dafara, walking home from the district office, passed by the market corner. He was in a hurry. Ediza had sent him a message requesting coconuts, specific coconuts, from a specific vendor, and he walked with the focused speed of a man who knew that arriving home without the correct coconuts was not an outcome worth considering. He might have passed the old woman entirely. But she said his name. Not loudly. Not theatrically. She simply said, Obele Dafara, as one would say the title of a book one has read before. He stopped. "Do I know you, old mother?" "Sit," she said. Now, Obele was a sensible man. Sensible men do not sit in dusty market corners with strangers who smell of rain memory and offer clay pots of nothing. But there was something in the way she said it, not a command exactly, more like a fact she was reporting, that caused his knees to bend of their own accord, and he found himself sitting on the small stool she had somehow produced without him seeing where it came from. "You are a man who has forgotten something," she said. "I haven't forgotten anything," he said, politely but firmly, in the manner of a man who suspects he might have. She tilted the clay pot slightly. Nothing came out. She tilted it back. "Would you like to see?" "See what?" She smiled, and the smile had the quality of a door opening onto a very large room. "The shape of what you have lost." He looked into the clay pot. There was nothing in it, or rather, there was nothing visible. But there was depth. More depth than the size of the pot should have allowed, the way certain conversations go deeper than the words being spoken. And then he saw. He saw his mother, Mama Sekliye, in her compound in Eshowo, on a night he did not know had happened. She was sitting beside the baobab tree. She was not weeping. Mama Sekliye did not weep for audiences. But she was speaking to the tree in a low voice, and Obele, leaning closer to the pot as though he could enter it, heard her words. "Old tree, I planted you with my husband's hands around mine. You were small. Now you are taller than my house. You have not forgotten who planted you. Why is it that men are not like baobabs?" She paused, listening to whatever the tree said back, and perhaps it did say something. Baobabs in the hill country are not to be underestimated. "I know," she said softly. "I know. A bird that abandons its nest does not become a better bird. It becomes just a bird." Then she stood up, gathered her wrapper around her with dignity, and walked inside. She did not slam the door. She did not sigh dramatically. She simply went in. And it was the quietness of that going in that cracked Obele somewhere foundational. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. He looked up from the pot. The old woman was watching him. "That is now," he said, his voice strange. "That is happening now?" "Most truth is," she said. "But how did she? Why doesn't she say anything to me? Why does she not tell me that she—" He stopped, because the answer arrived in his chest before his mouth could form the question. Because she raised him not to need to be asked. Because love, real love, the kind that fasts on Tuesdays and buys shoes for others before shoes for itself, does not hold itself over the head of the one it loves like a debt. It simply loves, and waits, and speaks to baobab trees when the weight becomes too much. "Who are you?" Obele asked the old woman. "No one important," she said, covering the pot with a cloth. "I am simply someone who travels with a pot of what is true. It gets heavy. I set it down. People look in. Some like what they see. Some do not. Most are surprised. And what do I owe you?" She waved a hand. "Nothing. The pot showed you willingly. That means you were already looking, even before you sat down. Most people who walk past here don't hear me call their name." She tilted her head. "Which means, young man, that some part of you has been looking for quite some time." Obele walked home without the coconuts. This was unprecedented. He walked home through the red harmattan dust with his hands empty and his mind full, and he sat on the patterned sofa that suggested wealth without confirming it, and he was very quiet. Adiza noticed immediately. A woman who has built an empire of small observations always notices a silence that doesn't fit. "Where are the coconuts?" "I forgot them." A pause longer than a coconut deserved. "You forgot?" "Adiza." He said her name in a way he had not said it before, not harshly, not coldly, but clearly, the way you say a word when you are certain of its meaning. I am going to Eshowo this weekend to see my mother. The silence that followed had texture. Your mother, Adiza said carefully, can come here if she wants to see. I am going to see her, Obele said. Simply. Finally. Now, Adiza was a woman of strategy. She knew when a battle was about to rain and when it was about something deeper. Looking at her husband's face, she understood with the clarity that only arrives too late that she had miscalculated something. She had thought she was removing a pebble from her shoe. She had not understood that the pebble was, in fact, the cornerstone of the building she was living in. However long the night, the dawn will break. She said nothing more that evening. And nothing is sometimes the beginning of everything. Obele arrived in Eshowo on a Saturday morning, when the dew was still on the grass and the market women were arranging their tomatoes with the care of people arranging flowers. He had brought things, a wrapper of good cloth, a tin of cocoa, some medicine for joints because he had noticed, the last time he saw her, that she walked with a slight favoring of her left side that she would never mention. He had also brought himself, which was the one thing that could not be bought at any market in Iberiku. Eshowo saw him arrive. Eshowo sees everything. Within minutes, the information was moving through the village like a current. Obele Dafara has come back. He is walking to his mother's compound. He is carrying things. He looks like a man who has recently learned something enormous. Mama Sekuye was at the side of the compound when she heard the gate. She looked up. Obele stood at the entrance of the compound he had grown up in. He was a grown man. He was 27 years old. He had a zinc-roofed house and a patterned sofa and a wife and a frangipani tree and a job that involved filing important papers. And standing at his mother's gate, he was 4 years old again and his father had just died and the only solid thing in the world was this woman in the compound before him who had decided, without drama and without negotiation, that she would hold everything together. He said, Mama. She did not run, Mama Sekuye did not run, she was not built for running, and also a woman who has waited that long has learned to arrive at things at her own pace. She walked to him, put both her hands on his face, and looked at him the way only mothers look at children, as if checking that the person she sent into the world is still intact. You are here, she said. I am here, he said. His voice did something it hadn't done in years. Come inside, she said. I will make tea. As if he had simply stepped out an hour ago. As if no time had soured between them. As if she had known all along, and indeed she had, that the tree planted in love does not die easily. Now, Eshowo of course debated this return for weeks. Was it the wife who changed? Was it a miracle? Was it the market woman with the pot, because Ezina the groundnut seller, who had contacts everywhere, had heard whispers of a very old woman in Iberiku who showed people things in a clay vessel? The debate grew colorful. It grew elaborate. Boniface Okafor, who had already been embarrassed once by misreported gossip, stayed unusually quiet, which the village took as confirmation that he knew more than he was saying, which made the gossip louder, which made Boniface even more aggressively quiet. The only person who did not debate it was Mama Sekuye. When her neighbor Mama Ruka came over and asked what had brought the boy back, was it juju? Did you go to a herbalist? Did you pray to the old ones? Mama Sekuye simply smiled and said, I spoke to my tree. The baobab? Yes. And what did it tell you? Mama Sekuye poured tea and looked out at the great baobab, which stood as it always stood, rooted and ancient and in no particular hurry to justify itself to anyone. It told me, she said, to be patient. That roots hold even when the branches sway away. That the tree does not chase the wind. But the wind, eventually, comes back to the tree. 3 weeks after Obele's return to Eshowo, the old woman with the clay pot disappeared from Iberiku market. There was, naturally, tremendous discussion. The empty corner where she had sat was examined thoroughly. The groundnut seller Ezina noted that the stranger had told her one last thing before she left, that her work was done here and the pot was now empty. What was in it before? Ezina had asked. Whatever each person needed to see, the stranger had said. And then she had walked away down the red dust road, her carved staff making small prints in the earth, until the harmattan swallowed her and the prints were covered over and there was no evidence at all that she had ever been there. Except in the people who had looked into the pot. Of those, there were apparently 7, though only Obele ever spoke of it. The others changed quietly, the way certain changes happen, not with announcements, but with a different quality of mourning. As for Adiza Mirindi, she is not a villain. Let us be clear about this. A villain knows what they are doing and proceeds. Adiza was something more common and more troubling, a person who had confused love with ownership, and status with worth, and had built her identity on the reflected light of others' opinions without understanding that reflected light casts no warmth. When Obele returned from Eshewo changed, not angry, not accusatory, just clearer, Adiza sat with that clarity for many uncomfortable days. Then, one evening, she said something Obele had not expected. I would like to go with you, next time. To see your mother. Obele looked at his wife, really looked, the way the old woman's pot had taught him to look, and saw in her something small and uncertain and genuine that the surface of her had been hiding even from herself. Good, he said. She makes very good tea. Adiza sat with that for a moment. Then, quietly, I know I have not been. I have not always been. I know, Obele said. I have not always been either. And that was all that was said. Because some repairs do not need a ceremony. They need only a decision and afterward, a direction. A man who uses his mother as a stepping stone will find, at the top, that he is standing on air. The mother who sacrifices in silence speaks louder than all the voices that would silence her. And the child who forgets the hand that lifted him does not become great, he becomes merely high up. There is a difference. The great man knows the difference. And knowing it, he returns. Like and subscribe.